Dale Earnhardt Jr. entered the NASCAR Cup Series with a name and a lot of pressure. The loss of his father in the 2001 Daytona 500 would leave him without an authority figure to navigate these ropes, developing a boring, well, we had a good run personality that strayed from controversy and expression in the public eye. But with the rise of the digital public sphere and a few life-changing events, as well as a few races, NASCAR fans have come to love the character and personality Little E has become. NRF Productions proudly presents Amping Up, the evolution of Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s personality in NASCAR. When Dale Earnhardt Jr. entered the NASCAR Cup Series, he was similar to his peers in the fact that he was a third-generation racer. What was different compared to the likes of Petty, Burton, Waltrip, and all the other legacy names is the fact that he was an Earnhardt. His father really had to make something of himself as a high school dropout, going from someone that had to drive a pink car to this intimidating character on the racetrack after 2+ decades on the tour. By the end of his career, he had the endorsements of huge American corporations that one in the blue-collar roots of North Carolina could only dream of. Goodwrench, Coca-Cola, Burger King, Wrangler, Bass Pro Shops, and Hershey's, they all wanted everything to do with Dale Sr., even if that was a Hershey-sized sticker on the B-pillar. Dale Jr., on the other hand, didn't need to become a personality to get that same love because of obviously the fact that he was Dale Earnhardt Jr. He could afford to piggyback a bit off of his dad's name as well as the Earnhardt legacy to get the big bucks from major American companies. Whether that was Budweiser, Chevrolet, Goodyear, Napa, Wrangler Jeans, Enterprise, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Nationwide Insurance, DirecTV, Oreo Rich, you name it. Dale Earnhardt Jr. did not need to be a character, a strong personality to eat good every night, have his own private jet, and date any supermodel he desired. The outcome of the 2001 Daytona 500 molded the personality of Dale Earnhardt Jr. even further. Most of the NASCAR greats had a mentor to lean on, whether it was John Bickford for Jeff Gordon, Eddie Jarvis for Tony Stewart, or in modern NASCAR, Bill Elliott, Dave Blaney, and Jeff Burton to guide their sons in a motorsport they know like the back of their hand. For Dale Earnhardt Jr., it was his father Dale Earnhardt. Losing him as a 26-year-old, a sophomore driver in the NASCAR Cup Series meant that he didn't have that figure of authority to guide him through a tough time in his personal development. Jr. didn't have someone to tell him how to handle the fame and how to handle being an Earnhardt. That last name alone carried a ton of power, a ton of pressure, a ton of expectation that Dale Jr. just was not prepared to fill. And I wholeheartedly believe that that was why Dale Jr. never won a championship. Dale Earnhardt Jr. openly admitted that he didn't have a strong work ethic at DEI, choosing to play video games instead of prepping for the next race. Heck, there's even a rumor out there that Dale Jr. got addicted to painkillers. If Dale Earnhardt Jr. were your typical young man today in America, many in society would consider him a loser, worthless, lazy, stuff like that. But because of his last name and status, Dale Earnhardt Jr., he could afford to struggle with these issues, struggle coping with his father's death. And because of that, overall, Jr. struggled to find his groove. He ultimately would find himself an identity, and he would stick to it for the longest time, staying avoidant and distant from the limelight the best he could. Dale Earnhardt Jr. became a man of the people, Redneck Jesus as he was known in the southern trailer parks of America. I think this route was both good and bad because there's the motto out there that says don't bite the hand that feeds you. Dale Earnhardt Jr. had a lot of people buying his merchandise and he had a lot of companies out there offering him millions to promote their product. Naturally, why on earth would you want to venture outside the box and show a side of yourself that would be so controversial? I know cancel culture wasn't what it was now, but in the corporate world, your values might play a role in whether or not you get endorsement deals or you end up getting looked over. Let's say you're a fitness junkie like Carl Edwards. Instantly you know Coca-Cola, Oreo, Fritos, and McDonald's, they will never sponsor you because these are companies right here that do not want you to be healthy. They want you to eat the typical NASCAR diet so that you stay addicted, you stay consuming their crappy processed foods and beverages. So on a personal level, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was winning because he had all this money and he had minimal stress, at least from what he could see. Dale Earnhardt Jr., he adopted and ran with this, well, we had a good run, boring personality that is perhaps best portrayed in this trackside interview the week after the 2008 Richmond Spring Race.
It was a tough deal. It was really tough to figure out what to do and how to handle it. And so I just tried to be cool until I saw everything and knew what exactly how it's going to feel about it.
Now, most NASCAR drivers, they would have been outraged or at least a bit ticked off whenever Kyle Busch, he sent it in too deep, which put Dale Jr. into the wall and continued this long dry spell of not reaching victory lane. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, and this was really how Dale Jr. felt about this whole situation. However, for him to show even the slightest displeasure in this instance would break his well-mannered, polished persona. That right there is why I have a controversial belief that Chase Elliott, yes, Chase Elliott has more personality in his 7th season than Jr. in that same timeline. Unlike Jr., Chase Elliott has actually shown displeasure with his competitors and has even savagely trolled and thrown some shade at guys like Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick. Dale Jr. would never do anything like this because that didn't align with his clean-cut and clean-shaven persona that corporate America saw him as. The argument could be made that Dale Jr. sold his soul for the almighty dollar. While that did grant him a lot of fans, I believe there were a solid handful of people that could not stand Dale Earnhardt Jr. because of the boring, well, we had a good run personality. Yet being the figurehead of a motorsport built on moments like Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison not holding back. Dale Earnhardt rattling the cage of Terry Labonte. Jeff Gordon becoming the first NASCAR driver to appear in movies and host Saturday Night Live. Dale Earnhardt Jr. on the other hand, he was as interesting as a vanilla ice cream cone. While a sweet delight, it didn't seem just that this was the most popular flavor. This one right here, a vanilla flavor, was the one that was a selling point to customers to come indulge in what NASCAR had to offer. The late 2000s and the early 2010s saw the blossoming of the digital public sphere. Facebook allowed you to digitally connect with your friends from high school. Twitter was the place to see how the population reacted to the death of Osama bin Laden. And Instagram allowed you to look at the digital photo books of close family members or even our favorite celebrities. NASCAR fans can now get a glimpse into the personal lives of their favorite stars without the TMZ-type paparazzi acting as mosquitoes sucking them of all their private and most intimate information. Stars like Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, and Brad Keselowski approached this as a new way to reach out to fans. Others chose to avoid these spaces, like Carl Edwards, the extreme emotionless figure known as Paul Menard, and of course Dale Earnhardt Jr. Now, the reason why he abstained was because he felt that being a social media personality, it was time draining, and for this reason, I think Dale Earnhardt Jr., he was wise beyond his years. Many of the social media algorithms today are specifically designed, engineered to keep you on the app as long as humanly possible, because the longer you scroll, the more ads that Mark Zuckerberg as well as Jack Dorsey, they can show you. Obviously, that means more and more money into their pockets. Dale Earnhardt Jr. also had a problem with what I call the negative reactionary echo chamber known as social media. If there is one emotion society has channeled much more since the introduction of these digital spaces, it is anger. Being the most popular driver he is, Dale Earnhardt Jr. would be a prime target for negativity. For a guy like Dale Jr., it did not make any sense for him to sacrifice time preparing for Sunday's race, time preparing Junior Motorsports for its Saturday races, and spending quality time with friends and family to instead listen to the losers comparing him to Casey Atwood. Ultimately, one race would flip the entire trajectory of Dale Jr.'s public personality upside down, making a devoted, heartfelt promise to his fans during the 2014 Speed Weeks that if he won the Daytona 500 on Sunday, he would join Twitter. In front of a primetime television audience due to the unpredictability of Florida weather, Dale Earnhardt Jr. became a Daytona 500 champion for the second time in his career. So of course, with winning the Daytona 500, his to-do list featured a lot of important things like attending the winner's banquet in the morning, putting the car in Daytona USA, and most important of all, joining Twitter. At 2:32 in the morning, Dale Earnhardt Jr. published his first ever tweet. A selfie of him with the Harley JRL trophy with the caption, "To not seem like a good night as any to join Twitter. How is everyone doing? Hashtag 2X Daytona 500 champ." Overnight, the Dale Earnhardt Jr. Twitter page blew up and got 240,000 new followers. In many ways, the fans won because now they could see Dale Earnhardt Jr. in a new limelight. But perhaps one could argue that all of this was Dale Earnhardt Jr. once again trying to appease the fans, as the true downside to this whole thing was that Dale Earnhardt Jr. would end up falling into the same trap as all of us when it comes to social media use. I feel like I'm getting more and more addicted to it to where I'm like, Do I need to be doing this so much? I'm sure everyone's gone through that, but I'm like, maybe I need to spend more time doing something else. But to Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s credit, at this point in his career, he was now to a point as a person, as a driver, where the fan criticism on Twitter, it didn't mean anything to him. That used to bother me when I was younger, but when you get old, you don't really care anymore about those kind of things. Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s 17th quest to become NASCAR Cup champion ended in an abnormal way than the other 16. And no, it wasn't with a championship, as in the words of Dale Jr.'s haters, the best part of waking up is knowing that this is Dale Jr.'s only cup. On June 12th at the Michigan International Speedway, Chris Buescher got loose and made contact with Dale Earnhardt Jr., going almost 200 miles into the wall, and that is never a good feeling. But for Dale Earnhardt Jr., he was doing alright. He was coping well. In the off week, he enjoyed himself in Germany before finishing 11th at Sonoma. Suddenly, a few weeks later, something felt a bit off about him. Dale Jr. was having vision problems and keeping balance, which is symptoms of a concussion. With a nonlinear path to recovery, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s sidelining went from races to weeks to months to eventually the remainder of the 2016 season. Dale Jr. had a lot of time on his hands to not only recover with the help of his wife Amy, but also to pursue things outside of the day-to-day NASCAR grind. And that sidelining would lead him to find his next calling in life, something that would have been considered very un-Dale Jr.-like in the "well, we had a good car" era. So what you got to keep in mind is that with the rise of social media, podcasting was just starting to hit the mainstream. And while Dirty Mo Media had been around since 2011, Dale Jr. himself didn't open up to making his own content until 2016. It was there where he would be open on his podcast about his concussion recovery, about what he was dealing with. Fans could now hear about what Dale Earnhardt Jr. was going through with his concussions. Whereas in 2002 when he had that hard impact at Auto Club, and 2012 when he had that vicious hit at Talladega where Jimmy Johnson latched onto him driving back to the pit lane, Dale Jr. was kind of just like, yeah, I had a concussion. But in this situation, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was extremely open to the fans. He opened up about what he was going through, what struggles, the process, stuff like that, and it really gave fans a new light to see Dale Earnhardt Jr. in these struggles. Perhaps it opened up a new perspective to the fans to see Dale Earnhardt Jr. as a guy that had flaws, as a guy that struggled with things that these people did in their lives too. Midway through the 2017 season, meanwhile, after announcing that it would be his appreciation tour, it would be the one that would call it a career, Dale Earnhardt Jr., he signed an on-air talent deal with NBC. With the podcast and a few guest analyst races for Fox and NBC, Dale Jr. was comfortable at this point that being a multimedia personality was the next chapter in his story. Immediately, he was thrust into new environments, covering Super Bowl 52 in Minnesota and the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. A bit of a warm-up to his full-season color commentator debut at the Chicagoland Speedway for the Overton's 400. Now, what you got to keep in mind is the fact that up until this point, up until this race in the season, the 2018 NASCAR Cup Series season was a complete dud. The same drivers won every single week in mostly dominant fashion. Kevin Harvick, he won 3 races in a row. Kyle Busch, he won 3 races in a row. Martin Truex Jr. at one point had a well over 10-second lead to win Auto Club. It was not a fun time to be a NASCAR fan, and Brian France hoped and prayed that the NBC kickoff would produce a new paradigm of fun and excitement. Dale Earnhardt Jr. on that afternoon would prove himself to be the Tony Romo of NASCAR. Mediocre driver, a driver that did not perform at the best of his ability, but his style and his sharing of the knowledge that he accumulated from his profession, it instantly made him a favored color commentator amongst the faithful fans of NASCAR.
Down the front straightaway, there's another bump going into turn 1. Feel that right there. It's like driving off a set of stairs.
Bottom of the track.
Slide job.
Trying to take the lead away.
Slide job. Almost.
Here comes the 18. He puts the bumper to the back of him.
After just one race in this 2018 season and his third ever in the broadcast booth, Dale Earnhardt Jr. already had himself one of the most iconic and authentic calls in NASCAR history. Now in his 5th full-time season as color commentator, Dale Jr. seems to be getting better and better to the point where he could potentially replace Rick Allen as the play-by-play guy for NBC Sports. His deal with NBC has also included the Wednesday slot of NASCAR America being dedicated to a clip from his podcast, The Dale Jr. Download. Hosted by he and his longtime friend Mike Davis, Jr. gets a ton of credit for giving us a new lens to view NASCAR. I am willing to bet the most passionate Dale Earnhardt Jr. fans would never in a million years listen to Kyle Busch's side of the story. Sure, him being on the Dale Jr. download probably didn't sway a lot of fans, changed Junior Nation's mind, but it gave a lot more context and it allowed these fans to freely think without kind of the pressures of, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kyle Busch, seeing them as one-sided figures, not seeing it from all angles, all perspectives, like we saw with Kyle Busch appearing on the Dale Jr. download to share his side of the story. Because we don't know a lot about the drivers themselves, we often form certain beliefs on them from their interviews and how they conduct themselves on the racetrack and on television. Because of the Dale Jr. download, we can now see things from their perspective a lot better and form the correct perspectives aligned to their values, good or bad. In 2020, Dale Earnhardt Jr. had his own docu-series on Peacock titled The Lost Speedways, a high-budget production where Jr. and his race enthusiast crew traveled across the country to tell the stories of places like San Antonio, Columbia, Pennsboro, and Myrtle Beach. The show has not been renewed for a season 3, but in its 2 seasons, it has been a fan-favorite show, one that NASCAR fans love to binge-watch. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has become a multimedia juggernaut in terms of NASCAR. He is one of the biggest personalities, one of the most respected personalities, and it all stems back to him finally coming out, finally opening up to the fans, to the people in the industry, and really showcasing his true colors as an individual. To this day, Dale Earnhardt Jr. still deals with some of the demons of being a shy, socially anxious individual. Even for someone of his status, being in front of the cameras for a NBC pre-race show talking to Brad Paisley can be a nervous experience. I was terrified, but they gave me the tools, and if I work and study and prepare, I can do okay. I can make it work. Dale Jr. has been a driver and a personality that has gotten by, being in the shadow of his father, having these high expectations. Being a guy that was kind of sheltered by corporate America. He wanted the money, he wanted to take the paycheck, so he couldn't authentically be himself. However, he's taken risks, he's become more mature and more open as a man to where he has now become a credible multimedia personality. He's now one of the most prominent faces on Twitter. He's now one of the most authentic color commentators in NASCAR history. He's one of those guys you want to listen to in the form of a podcast because he has become a historian of NASCAR. He has really developed this personality because he has now opened up. He has matured in many ways, grown from his younger years. He has finally become comfortable with the name and the personality he has. Just one of the reasons why Dale Earnhardt Jr. has truly amped up his personality in a big way. So anyways, this is Nathan for NRF Productions signing out, and just remember guys and gals, life's a beach and then you drive.